Greetings, my name is Joy LaBarge Bryan. I am posting this video in an effort to call attention to and obtain assistance with the refusal of the United States Army to allow me to retire after 37 plus years of military service as a member of the Military Intelligence Corps of the United States Army. I have been attempting to obtain my retirement, medical or otherwise, since I received a 100% disability rating from the Veterans Administration in August of 2012, backdated to 2009. I suffer with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, and military sexual trauma. I realize this seems to border on the twilight zone, especially in the light of my length and type of military service. Yet I ask you to bear with me as I provide a synopsis of what has occurred. I'm also posting related government documentation, including my Op Form 612 or Federal Service Resume, on my Facebook page to validate my claims. I have, prior to this posting, contacted just about anyone who I thought might be able to assist me, as they have had direct knowledge of my military service as a dual component officer, to include President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, General James Vesey, retired, General James A. Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, General Michael Hayden, former Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Jeffrey W. Talley, the Chief of Army Reserves, the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, the Army Human Resources Command and its Inspector General, the Congressional Legislative Oversight Office at the Pentagon, the United States Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General, Senators John McCain, David Vitter, Mary Landrieu, and Cedric L. Richmond, Ms. Ellen DeGeneres, CNN, and the Army Board of Corrections, all to no avail. This is the only thing I have not tried. A direct appeal to the American people and the government of the United States through social media. I began my service to this country by enlisting as both an undercover narcotics and vice officer for the city of New Orleans, Louisiana, and as a United States Army Reserve military intelligence private with an Army Reserve unit in Pensacola, Florida in 1970. In 1971, after completing my training with the NOPD, I was called to active duty as a member of the Army Security Agency, intelligence analyst, Women's Army Corps, with the 361st Civil Affairs Brigade in Vietnam, serving from January through June, during which time the medevac of U.S. troops who had remained in country due to the severity of their injuries and the non-combatant evacuation order of the American Embassy were performed in Saigon. I stayed on duty with the NOPD until 1978 after my return from Saigon. In July of 1978, I returned to military service. In 1982, while stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, I received a Defense Officer Personnel Management Act, or DOTMA, dual component commission based on my service in Vietnam and the quality of my military service at Fort Hood. From this time on, I received both non-commissioned officer evaluation reports and officer evaluation reports, or in Army parlance, NCOERs and OERs, in accordance with Army regulation. I served with distinction as a member of the United States Army's Military Intelligence Corps for 19 years, 7 months, and 14 days. Then, in 1994, my service to this great nation came to a screeching halt. President William Jefferson Clinton decided to downsize the United States Armed Forces, starting with the U.S. military in Europe. Now, most Americans, and most serving active duty military, do not understand, nor are they told, that as an American soldier serving overseas, you have no legal representation on American soil should the U.S. government decide to enact a law that negatively impacts upon your military service and/or livelihood. That is exactly what happened to the serving Army personnel in Europe from 1994 through 1996. Intelligence personnel are a premium asset to the U.S. government and to the U.S. military. It costs tens of thousands, if not more, of U.S. tax dollars to train and to keep intelligence personnel with active top secret clearances and our very specialized training on the active duty roles. These kinds of service members are the bread and butter of the military-industrial complex. In late 1994, every single U.S. Army Staff Sergeant through Sergeant Major serving in Europe who had over 16 years of service were informed that they were being RIFed. In Army parlance, that is a reduction in force. That is to say, their military service was being terminated due to the needs of the U.S. government. At that time, in the Army, a soldier who was close to retirement was allowed to, quote-unquote, lock in for retirement. That lock-in was negated by President Clinton, our Commander-in-Chief. Soldiers who were just a week away from retirement were told they were not being allowed to retire and that they had to go through the appeals process. You were given just one appeal. The appeals process took a couple of years. Needless to say, this presidential action was detrimental to each impacted command's mission. Every single senior non-commissioned officer was normally the non-commissioned officer in charge, or in COIC, of an operational unit, function, or position. This effectively gutted the enlisted structure of all downsized military commands in Europe. I personally went through the appeals process, and my appeal was denied. I was out-processed from active duty military service in July of 1996. But I had a saving grace that only 99 other people on the U.S. Army rolls shared with me: my United States Army Reserve Commission. At the time of my being, quote-unquote, kicked out of the Army to save money for the United States, I was a promotable major in the Military Intelligence Corps. And as a direct result of my dual status, I returned to work the very next day as a major. I continued my Army service as an officer, and as of this moment, I am still carried on the active duty Army rolls as a lieutenant colonel. Some of the highlights, quote-unquote, of my military career include briefing 5 United States presidents, from Ronald Reagan through and including George Bush Jr. I was captured in Colombia in 1984 by the Cali cartel, held in a cage, raped, beaten, and tortured, while serving as a member of a joint task force tasked with counter-drug intelligence collection. I was rescued by a Special Forces Operation Delta Team, SFOD, after 3 weeks. I served as a courier for the Central Intelligence Agency numerous times, and I served as a Senior Military Intelligence Planner, or G2, instrumental in moving the 1st Infantry Division from Würzburg, Germany to Turkey to be the Armed Forces North in 2001. I was the first female U.S. Army Europe soldier assigned to Great Britain since World War II. I have graduated from the JFK Special Warfare School in 1990 and have trained at Fort Harmony Church at Fort Benning, Georgia on numerous occasions from 1985 through 2003. My last tour of duty in 2000 was at Camp Butmir, Sarajevo, serving as the headquarters security officer for Headquarters S4, Stabilization Forces, Operation Joint Forge. I trained with numerous multinational Special Forces services and was widely known throughout the Special Forces community internationally as Sergeant Jake. In 1990, I received a call from an Army colonel who identified himself as a staff member of the Intelligence Oversight Committee. He calmly informed me of the following: that Congress was decommissioning the Defense Officer Personnel Management Act, DOPMA, and instituting the Reserve Officer Personnel Act, ROPMA. That our enlisted and reserve service would continue to be concurrent, and that upon leaving active duty enlisted status, our status would become consecutive, and that all time served would be good time. That we would be automatically promoted to the next rank after meeting minimum time and grade and service requirements, and both enlisted and officer professional development educational requirements. That the U.S. Army had been mandated to form and maintain a control group for all remaining dual component personnel. That as the only female intelligence officer, heck, the only intelligence officer in a dual component status, I would be issued and had to keep an active duty U.S. Army Reserve ID card, and was subject to involuntary Presidential Select Reserve call-up, or PSRC-I, until age 65. And that at that time I would receive a gray retiree identification card. That upon my birthday at age 65, I would also be allowed to retire at the rank of 08, Major General, with all pay and privileges of that rank. As he spoke, I wrote all this down. Everything he told me held true. But what he could not have known was that DOPMA's AR 600-39 would be forgotten and unlearned by current human resources professionals and managers and subject matter expert personnel under ROPMA, and that we last 100 dual component soldiers would become non-existent during that conversion from DOPMA to ROPMA. I now find myself in a position I never thought would occur, that the United States Army would fail to follow through on a congressional mandate and forget 100 outstanding soldiers who have performed double duty for our great nation. As I stated above, in August of 2012, I finally received a 100% disability, backdated to 2009, from the Veterans Administration. The reason for the delay was the fact that the intelligence collection operation that caused the majority of my physical and psychological injuries was classified top secret, and I had to fight the declassification authorities with the assistance of the Military Order of the Purple Heart, MOPH, and the Organization of Disabled American Veterans, the DAV, for over 2 years to have the records declassified. Thankfully, a member of the MOPH was actually on that classified operation with me and was able to assist me in overcoming the issues surrounding declassification so that I could receive the medical treatment so long denied me by my service as an intelligence professional. In 2012, I began contacting the United States Army seeking an earlier retirement for medical reasons. The appropriate regulations governing my dual component service and retirement can be found in now obsolete Army Regulations 135-100, AR 600-39, AR 135-155, plus all associated Department of the Army pamphlets. It was at this point that I was informed that in 2002, during the conversion of DOTMA to ROTMA, that the office, which was congressionally mandated as a control group for the dual status personnel, had been disbanded, and there was apparently no one left to manage the control groups. It was at this time that I also found out that I had been illegally removed from the U.S. Army Reserve rolls under ROTMA as a commissioned ROTMA officer, which I had never been. I was commissioned under DOTMA, Mobilization Designee, the DOTMA MobDes program. I had never been assigned to ROTMA, nor promoted as a member of ROTMA. Therefore, such a removal was illegal from what I learned from the Office of the Inspector General at the Army Human Resources Command at Fort Knox, Kentucky. In June 2013, I filed a request with the Army Board of Corrections, Army Review Boards Agency, or ARBA, and received the following response. August 27th, 2014. AR 201-300-19781, Brian Joy LaBarge. Dear Ms. Brian, reference is made to your application for correction of military records dated August 27, 2013, concerning your request for a dual-component military medical retirement under all Army regulations governing the U.S. Army Mobilization Personnel, MOPERS, processing system, Mobilization Designee, MobDes program under the Defense Officer Personnel Management Act, DOTMA, of 1980, because of a lack of knowledge and understanding of DOTMA by the current personnel in the military retirement branch at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Army Regulation 15-185 sets forth policy and procedures followed by the board. Paragraph 2-8 of that regulation provides that the staff may return an application without action if it is incomplete. Reviews of your application by several different staff members of the board and attempts to acquire meaningful advisory opinions from other Army staff elements have resulted in an inability to determine exactly what corrections you are asking to receive and what documents should be corrected. Your application contains approximately 80 pages, most of which is narrative discussion from you. You have not provided sufficient official documentation, law, or regulatory guidance to corroborate many of your contentions. It is strongly recommended that you review your application and break your issues into small units that can be clearly presented for review and consideration. In view of the foregoing, your application is returned without prejudice and without action being taken by the board. Sincerely, Sarah A. Burklaw, Director, Army Board for Corrections and Military Records. My last point of contact was with Maria Lillibridge Thompson. Her number is 703-697-9308 in the Congressional Legislative Oversight Office at the Pentagon in November of 2014. She informed me that I might find something to help me in the Library of Congress. Since that point, I have heard absolutely zero. I have been a fighter and a soldier for over 37 years, and I am so very tired of fighting. I am asking everyone who reads this or hears this to do anything possible that you can to help me, if it is nothing more than sending a copy of this to your federal legislator. I have served this country with the utmost distinction and cannot understand why the same country has turned its back on me. From my Commander-in-Chief on down, I thank you for your time and your consideration. Anyone interested in corroborating material can find my OpForm 612 on my Facebook account under J. LaBarge Bryan, as well as a copy of various identification cards from my military and government service. You will find also all documentation sent to the Army Review Board for correction of military records. I'm yours in service, Joy LaBarge Bryan, Lieutenant Colonel, Military Intelligence Corps, United States Army Reserve. I thank you.